So hello everyone, we are live, episode 2 of the podcast on the live stream on YouTube. Thanks everyone for joining the first one. We had great success with that. Over 50 people watched it, which is brilliant for our first pod that's a live stream. So yeah, thanks for joining. We are the premium_FPL podcast for those who've not already aware of who we are. I'm Callum and I'm joined as always by the Mercurial Mindy.
Have you just made up a word there?
What, the Mercurial?
You mean mercurial?
That's the one. Oh, start.
I mean, yeah.
I should have rehearsed that.
We're lucky to be recording today. With your injury, you've got a pre-season injury, haven't you?
Yeah, Curly Whirly put a test to my crown, which put me as a doubt for the FFS tomorrow. But yeah, we should pass the late fitness test, head down the trip to London, and we're very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, so if anyone's going to the Fantasy Football Festival tomorrow, if you're as keen as geeky as us, come say hello. Callum will be the one with no teeth, and I'll be the one taking Son in and out of my fantasy team last minute. You'll see us at the bar.
Salah last year, Son this year. Hope you get on the right side of it this year.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll get the admin out of the way before we get going. So it's 6 o'clock on Thursday. Obviously, if you're live, you know what time it is. But for the benefit of the podcast listeners, 6 o'clock on Thursday. So there's been some press conferences today, but I've not seen anything big yet. But obviously, we're not up to speed with whatever happens tomorrow on the Friday during this one. If you want to follow us on Twitter, premium_FPL, same on Instagram. And yeah, live on YouTube. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe. Get that bell ticked, so whenever we go live, you'll get a notification. I think
You've been rehearsing that.
I've just got the same. I've got the same 3 things written here to do for the admin: timestamp, socials, YouTube plug.
That's you done, lad.
And then it's something else. Yeah, we'll do our premium league again, shall we?
Yeah.
We'll tweet out the code for our prize league after this. So I think last season, just the only thing we asked is if you could leave us an iTunes review, and then we'll have you in contention our league for a cash prize at the end of the season. Yeah, that's everything. Do you want to do a overview of the running order? What we're going through today?
Yeah, so very much up till deadline tomorrow. That's going to be a talking point. Obviously, people are going to be excited to hear about our squads or not excited to hear about Mindy's squad. But there's been a few players who've kind of emerged. We talked about Amati, the Community Shield at the weekend. There's another Liverpool player. I'm sure you're all familiar with who that is. Going to run through the premium planning segment as always. Then hopefully we'll have a few questions from people watching on YouTube. We had a few from the first stream, so hopefully we can answer them as we go along. And then we'll finish with our latest team reveals before previewing the Fantasy Football Fest, which we're heading to tomorrow, which we're very much looking forward to. But first off, we're going to start with a question that we've had from the community, from Kieran Curtis. So he's asked the question that is, what's more important for you when selecting a player? Is it the eye test or the stats?
It's a big question, that, isn't it? It's a very big question. It's a bit like asking someone what happens when you die. It's like the equivalent of that for the FPL community, that question, I think. I'll start. But while I go into that, is it definitely live on YouTube? Just to
yes,
check.
we are, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Are you able to keep an eye on the questions coming in? It doesn't let me see it. Cool. So for that question, eye test or stats, I think for me personally, the way I play it's always more eye test. I think if you use stats a lot, you have to be confident that you're using them the right way, and like it can be quite easy to sort of get into confirmation bias. Like you can just look for stats that support whatever you feel like doing sometimes. So I've always felt more comfortable using the eye test. I do use stats if I see a case presented like on Twitter or something, and it seems well reasoned and balanced, I might use that to support a decision. But I've never really just used stats. But then there's managers like, for example, FPL General, who doesn't use stats at all, really. He just seems to use eye test, and that's it. And he's had 3 top 500 finishes. And then there's other managers who've won the game who live in other parts of the world where they can't watch the football, and they just use stats. So it's case dependent. And I think one thing we sort of noticed last season is that it can be player dependent as well. Like, stats don't tell the story for every player. Like you mentioned on last week's pod, the case of Son. Like, looking at his like shot in the box and expected goals data, it doesn't tell you whether to get him in or not, because he's just someone who consistently overperforms. That like his finishing is just so elite that you can almost just disregard how good his stats are. But then the other players, like maybe like Antonio, like when his shot numbers go through the roof, you know it's a good time to get him in. Like, I think there was that game where he got 4 against Norwich and his stats were through the roof just before that, which was a good indicator that he was about to go off. So it doesn't really answer the question, but it's just a bit of both, really. And it depends on how you want to play. Like, do you like going over numbers, or do you prefer watching a lot of football? For me, I like to watch a lot of the games anyway, so that's how I do it.
Yeah, fair shout. I probably err more on this side of stats, because I think more often than not they do kind of paint a picture, really, and those returns do come, like say with Antonio, and most players you do. Son's probably one who stands out, like say, who it finishes like chances that he shouldn't finish. Another one for me is probably Jesse Lingard last season. Like, his XG and XGA was just like was pretty much non-existent compared to the returns that he was getting. So he was probably another one last season who kind of stood out. But I think for me personally, there's that many good players now in FPL. It's not only the stats of the game, but the transfers in and out is something that I look at. You can kind of say that's a stat based as well. Just because I think there's a lot of people like us now who are very invested in FPL, so that is a telling indicator as well. Not just but I do get the eye test. That's the beauty of football, isn't it? And when you see a player who you watch one week and he looks phenomenal, and then you bring him in and he scores next week, that's probably the most satisfying moment in FPL, rather than jumping on bandwagons and stuff. So I kind of see merit to both, but I'm probably more of a stats player as opposed to an eye test.
What do you do? So what do you do during the first few weeks of the season when there's not really like data trends and there's not enough data to sort of make those like smart decisions? Do you just go with like whoever's got the most points that week, or do you use eye test more at the start, or what do you do at the start?
Well, we talked last year at the start of the season about what the strategy was, and mine was pretty much just jumping on players who are going to have a price rise. Obviously not like really out there players who probably won't keep it up, but say if Mane gets a double first game, like I wouldn't hesitate to jump on him, just because there is so many players playing these days. Like, players can rise 0.1, 0.2 in a single game week. So that was my strategy last year, and it was successful for me, and I probably will try and look to do that again this year. Just try and capitalize and get that team value in the bank. So that's probably what I do first few game weeks, and then from there I kind of do stats. So basically just be boring first few weeks, not take too many risks.
Be boring for the seasons. That's your strategy.
Yeah, they'll make a few gambles here and there, but we've talked previously about you can't win FPL in the first few weeks, but you can definitely find yourself far and away out of contention with it. So I think play it safe. I've tinkered with squad today, and I kind of like the look of Ben Rama and people like that. But I think there's only 2 or possibly 3 players you're gambling with those first few weeks. The rest of the squad, the ownership's probably a big thing for me. And then gamble with 2, maybe 3 players.
Yeah, I think the value thing could be like so much more important this season as well. If that Kane transfer goes through, and if Lukaku at Chelsea, like everyone's going to be taking money out of defence and looking for having a really expensive attack. So yeah, the value thing I'm definitely going to go for more this season for that more than anything. Anything else on stats? What just for like for people who maybe haven't used stats before, like what would you say is the metric you use the most?
Probably XG and XGA. There's another one that's coming this season, expected threat. So I don't know how much of an influence that's going to have on FPL. I've heard a few players, few people in football actually downplaying it. Probably Dean Smith, who lives in the real world, not the fantasy world. But stats like that will be interesting to see, because I think it is still relatively new, isn't it? Like XG and stuff. It's only been around a few seasons. So as you kind of progress the next 5-10 years, that it's just going to take up another level, I think. And the stats that are going to be available to people like me and you are going to be pretty much so in depth that you can make any conclusion you may want to make from those that you can get.
Well, one time I do actually use stats quite often, actually, is for helping with captaincy decisions. Because sometimes they're so 50-50. Sometimes, say like, say if Salah and Fernandes have both got a team in the bottom half at home, something like looking at the opposition team's expected goals conceded, things like that can help sway you. Like if you're literally torn, sometimes I'll look to stats and data there to help make the decision. Because especially with defenses, it can be they can be quite accurate. Like looking at, I remember, was it like Sheffield United last season, when their expected goals conceded went through the floor after Wilder left, and they started shipping quite a few goals. Like as you were saying, stats do often tell a picture, and with defenses, it can be quite accurate. So yeah, that's one where I do use stats quite a lot.
Yeah, we'll move on from there. One player who we don't have stats for, which is going to be a bit of an interesting punt for quite a few members if you're playing FPL, is the guy from Liverpool, Tsimikas. I'll share him now.
Have you done your homework? Have you done your homework on that pronunciation? Yeah, is that right?
I've just been looking at how people pronunciating it across different podcasts, and that Tsimikas seems to be the one that people are going for. So we'll roll with that unless you have any suggestions.
No, we'll stop calling him Konstantinos then, as we did last week.
His first name's almost harder to pronounce than his second name. Why would you go with his first name?
Yeah, maybe. I just feel like I've come across, like, Constantinople is something I've come across before, and Konstantinos is similar. But as someone who has a name that people find hard to pronounce, I should put more effort into these difficult names. I should really know better.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, last season he only played 6 minutes in FPL. It's 2 points. So draw any conclusion that you want to make from that. But yeah, with the Robbo news getting injured in the friendly, which was unfortunate. It's such a stalwart for that Liverpool defence. He's kind of emerged as that 4 million defender. Amati was probably the most popular before now, but his ownership's raced up. It must have been about 0 point something percent before the Robbo injury. It's now 16.4%, which he must be the most popular player transferred in this week. I know effectively there's been no transfers the first game, but he must be the most that people have brought into this week. And it's kind of changed that dynamic because everyone was probably Trent, Salah and Jota, and now kind of shakes things up a bit with, I think Trent and Salah will still be popular, but is it Jota or Tsimikas is going to be the third Liverpool option?
Yeah, you mentioned Amate there. I think Southampton have. I'm not sure if it's been fully completed, but Vestergaard's expected there, isn't he, at Leicester? So
yeah, be agreed. Yeah.
So yeah, that doesn't look great anymore. Obviously, the big pro with Tsimikas is that I think one thing that helped sway a lot of people was the assist he got the other night in pre-season. Like he whipped in a ball almost as if he was Robertson. So, and he's been singled out for praise by Klopp in his quotes. So the doubt that I had about like whether Milner would have that spot over him is sort of gone for me. It's just a short-term move because Robertson's injury isn't that bad. And the other main negative is that it's just you can't. It takes a Liverpool spot. So if Jota or Mane go off and you want to keep Salah and Trent, you can't then react to that. That's the main thing I think you've got to think about if you're going for Tsimikas. How are you happy to be locked out of a third, one of the other Liverpool boys, one of the ones who could be a bit more explosive? What are your thoughts on that?
There's two sides to that, isn't there? If Jota and Mane do score 1 or 2 first game, it's like, how do I get them in? And then there's also, you don't know how well Van Dijk's going to come back, and say if you play that first game and the defence looks really leaky, you're stuck with 2 Liverpool defenders that you might not want. I do expect him to be strong with Van Dijk. Hopefully his injury, he can come back from that and be the same player. But that's probably another side to it. If they do concede a couple of goals against Norwich, suddenly you're stuck with 2 Liverpool defenders that the defence doesn't look as strong. But I think the first option is probably more likely to cause a hindrance, whether Jota and Mane kind of explode that first game week. And Jota's the one for me because he's 7.5, isn't he? And there's a lot of midfielders around here there, but he can kind of make a mockery of his price tag, doesn't he? With them first few fixtures, Norwich, Burnley, then Chelsea's a bit of a difficult one, but Leeds, aways, people get goals at Ellen Road, and then Palace, Brentford. If Jota's playing all 6 of them games, I don't know if Firmino's back. You fancy him to get a few goals there, so I think
Firmino did come back and score a couple of goals the other night,
right?
So I think I'm not sure about Jota for that reason. Like I had him for parts of last season, and it was very hard to predict when he was going to play and when he wasn't. So yeah, the fact that Firmino's come back like on his first game back in pre-season, he's bagged 2. I think that's put out. I think Jota will probably start the first one, but then I reckon they'll just rotate as they did last season. So I think I am going to take the risk on Tsimikas because, like we said at the start, we're going to need as much money in the attack soon as we can, and he helps do that. My actually main concern, now that I've just thought about it, you mentioned his ownership. If Robertson comes back for like game week 3 or 4, I'm happy to, with him being 4.0, I'm happy for him to just be the third player on my bench. That's what you have to sort of accept with a player that price. The problem is that if people start transferring him out en masse, he could drop 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, which if we're trying to protect our team value, that's another downfall because it's not going to be a priority transfer, is it? Moving a 4.0 defender. You're not really going to want to do that until you wildcard, which is something else, which is another thing just to think about on that one.
Yeah, I'll talk about it later, but that's the reason I took out Ben Foster today, because his ownership's like 27%, and there's going to be a lot of casual fans who think Ben Foster, Watford's number 1. He's been Watford's number 1 for years. He's going to be playing. I've got a 4 million keeper, and they're going to be in for a shock when Batman's playing. So that's another thing that's come into my head with that as well. But overriding thought is, I think it was FPL General's podcast I was listening to earlier, and he says, whenever FPL gives you a bone, you've got to take it. And there's only a few opportunities in a season. And a Liverpool defender for 4 million. I know Nat Phillips was the same last year, but you've got an attacking fullback as compared to a centre half, which makes the option even more appealing. And I just think 4 million, you're getting 5 or 6 fixtures out of Liverpool's left back is, on the face of it, it's unbelievable value, isn't it? And you can, like you say, you can invest your money elsewhere. And if he was the first choice left back, he would probably be about 6.5. So you're getting an extra 2.5 for your money there.
Yeah, just don't back down on that bone that FPL are giving you, because you'll be out of teeth.
Oh, Curly Whirly Gate got me. How many times are you going to make the joke?
Actually, is a Curly Whirly something you always get when you go to the cinema?
No, I've not had one for years, and I forgot how chewy they were.
They are like cement. I remember the last time I had one, I thought never again. So yeah, that's just clarified that for me. Never touching a Curly Whirly again. Have we had anything in the chat so far?
There's a few questions. Do you want to run through them now, or do you want to wait for the question segment?
We'll do one just to break it up.
All right, so the first one came from quite early on from Chris Bell. So hi, Chris. So he's saying down with Callum Lambert's FPL team. I think he's bored of me winning the Works mini league. So sorry, Chris. But on a serious note, is Brentford's Ivan Toney worth the punt this season? And I'll start this because you answered the first question. If that's all right. And for me, yes, we talked about the talisman theory last podcast. He's on penalties. 33 goals he got in the Championship last season, and quite a lot of them were penalties. But I think 6.5 in an attacking Championship team that's getting promoted. First time in the Premier League and with the fans. And we know from Norwich's start, I know it wasn't their first time, but Norwich's start to the season 2 years ago when they beat City, they really started on fire at home. And I kind of hope that Brentford will do the same. I know they got Arsenal first game on the Friday night, which you can kind of see him getting a goal there. But then after that, Palace, Villa, Brighton, and then Wolves. So they've got a nice, generous start before game week 6, where they kind of fall off a cliff. So I'm hoping that he's going to start off really well, and yeah, he's in my team for that reason.
I'm less confident just because I didn't really want to start with any promoted. I didn't want to start with a player for any of the promoted teams anyway, and then I don't think Brentford they haven't really strengthened that much, have they?
No.
No. So I'm not. I don't feel that confident as to how they're going to be able to replicate how attacking they were in the Championship into the Premier League straight away, given the fact they haven't strengthened. And then beyond the others, I have had him in some of my drafts just because that price is great to help you have a strong midfield. But at the moment, I don't have him just for... I think if I'm going to have two strikers, I prefer Ings and Antonio. But I think he's like the third best shout after those two.
Yeah, I think I toyed with the idea of Rafinha as fifth mid and two up top. So I think he's probably the one, isn't it? It's either you have Tony as your third striker or you're getting a fifth midfielder. He's probably the decision that you've got to make.
And like if you're trying to be safe and cautious, whatever, like Rafinha, you know a bit more what you're getting. Like you know that he can do it, and you know that Leeds are going to be able to perform at a decent level under Bielsa. Whereas with Brentford, it's like, one, you're taking a gamble on Tony being able to replicate his goal scoring exploits, and two, you're taking a gamble on the team being able to create as much for him as they did in the Championship. So yeah, it depends how much you like Brentford, basically.
Yeah, he's just the one that. Well, I know his ownership's 30%. Some players start off with a mad ownership, but he's probably the one. I was going to say it was a bit of a gamble, but at 30%, he's probably not. He's probably a safe pick on the basis.
Well, yeah, it's kind of a gamble to go without him at that ownership.
Yeah. So he's in my team as one of the gambles. I've kind of got 3 players earmarked to my 11, and he was a gamble, but maybe not at that price, maybe not at that ownership. Sorry.
Cool. Hopefully that's answered that question.
We've got a few more, but we'll save them till after the premium planning segment, which we'll run through now. Just share my screen again. So this is a great tool from FPL if people don't already use it. So this is kind of the fixture difficulty rating. It's not entirely accurate all the time, just because it kind of doesn't react to people out of form and stuff. But this is kind of based on last year's position, and kind of the big 6 always tend to be the harder fixtures. But we'll run through the best captaincy options for the first couple of fixtures anyway.
Should we just explain, like, I think last season at the start, we explained why we do the premium planning segment. I'll just do a little intro on why we do it. So kind of the name for the podcast came from the fact that a lot of the strategy for having a good season is around planning well around the most expensive players, the ones that you can captain. So a lot of decisions that you make with your team can be settled by looking at, am I going to need that player for a captain? When do I need to bring them in? When do they have a run of these easy green fixtures that are, low on the fixture difficulty rating? So it does help. Say, for example, when you put in your game week 1 team together, if it's a player who's like 9 million or above, and you're looking at the next 6, and you're not going to captain that player in those 6 fixtures, it makes you just think, like, is it worth having that player in your team, given the cost, given they command that premium price? So it's something that we try to look at each week, don't we? And with the season starting tomorrow, and we're fully in the planning prep mode, it's time to get into it. So game week 1 captain, we don't really have to go into that much. I think everyone's on Salah, but after that, we can start looking ahead a bit. So have you looked at game week 2?
Yeah, I think 2 for me without Yannick Vestergaard for Southampton. I think Fernandes will probably be high up my thoughts, and then potentially I've got Grealish. I've got Mahrez, in my latest draft. That Norwich game at home, he's probably another one that kind of enters my thoughts. But then Salah again, Burnley at home. You're kind of blessed with options for game week 2, aren't you? Probably wait and see how teams look in game week 1, because I think some teams will be further ahead than others. For example, Liverpool got the front 3 back already, so they might be sharper than, say, City or United. I know City didn't look great, Community Shield last weekend. So, yeah, probably wait and see to see how those 3 look, and it's probably one from them 3.
Yeah, and then I don't disagree with any of that. Game week 3 is where it starts to get interesting, because Liverpool have Chelsea, so that takes Salah out of the captaincy running. Well, I mean, you could still captain him, but it's just not ideal. And then I think it's kind of between Son at Watford and Fernandes at Wolves there, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm expecting Arsenal to look a lot better this season, because I said, didn't they got the second best defense from January last season, I think. So I kind of expect them to be a bit better. And I know City drew against them towards the end of last season, so that fixture probably doesn't stand out too much. If City start off on fire and hitting goals for fun, and Arsenal getting whipped, then that probably change. But yeah, I think that's probably a reason to go for Son. I know you've got Son in your latest tinker, because that's
partly why. Because when I did this exercise and started looking at who might I want to capture in game week 3 and then game week 4, Son starts to, and it's also just the fact that I think he scored in every preseason game. Like, I think he's got the highest goal involvement of all the Premier League players, and not that I put that much emphasis on it, but it's just something that's an indicator for, he's up for it this season, it seems.
Yeah, and Leicester's probably another one. Norwich away. I know we're targeting Norwich. Sorry, Norwich, but you've got Harvey Barnes, or not many teams have Jamie Vardy, but I think Harvey Barnes is probably the Leicester asset that's emerging, isn't it? So that Norwich away could be enticing if they're playing well.
Speaking of targeting, like in the off season when all the stuff was going on with Palace, like there was a lot of chatter about them, Palace being a whipping boy. Do you think? I think the talk's been with Vieira going to be playing a bit more expansively. If they are shipping goals, even Antonio might be a candidate that week if he's still fit by game week 3.
Yeah, Palace at home. Yeah, potentially. I know they've had a new director on board today, so they've got an extra 90 million, I think, for the transfer budget. So they're going to be bringing in a few players, but that necessarily doesn't translate to success. So yeah, that's probably one to keep an eye on for sure.
I'll let you do game week 4.
4 probably is United, isn't it? Newcastle at home, which is kind of, there's a lot of people, it's kind of died down a bit this week, but a lot of people were kind of toying with the idea of no Bruno. And I just think when you do this and you kind of see that United have got a captaincy candidate for probably 3 out of the first 4 game weeks, it's a risk to go without him for that reason, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. And that, the thing for me is that you were talking before about seeing how teams look, and in this week, like Spurs have got Palace, so Son looks good again. So just in case United start slow like they did last season, and it takes them a while to build up their momentum, I do like just the fact that I've got 2 captain options for 3 and 4 apart from Fernandes. Like, so Son being there, that's kind of where that's come into my team. So yeah, and also having the money concentrated in your attack like that with those 3 premiums in midfield, I can easily do Son to a 6 and then Ings to Lukaku. Should Lukaku be starting to play by that point? So there's a couple. They're the main couple of reasons really for why Son's coming to my latest team.
Yeah, and I'd say this year more than ever, only focus on the first 5 games because, say, Kane goes to City and Lukaku inevitably makes that move to Chelsea. I think from around the game week 6, which is the Southampton fixture, their fixtures take a real lovely turn. So there's going to be a lot of early wildcards this year, I'd say, if Kane does to make that move. And there's going to be a lot of money in that forward line because Kane and Lukaku, that's a devastating strike force that you kind of want to have your hands on. It's just how do you fit Salah and other players in. But if Kane does make the move, I'll probably try and look to get them both in on my first wild card for sure.
Cool. And then should we do one more week of this?
Yeah, so it's game week 5, which is, again, Liverpool, Palace at home, City, Southampton.
Yeah, I think it's between those two,
that's
really,
probably
isn't
them
it?
two, isn't it? Yeah.
So, yeah, the main issue, the main thing that I don't like about my current draft is that I don't have a City player. I think I kind of want to see how they look and who looks most secure for minutes, etc. So yeah, between Gundogan and Grealish, I don't know which one's going to be more advanced, which one's going to be sitting deeper. I think I need to just have a look how City play for a couple of weeks before I go in on that. I know you're saying about Mahrez. If he was a touch cheaper, I'd probably have him. But
my worry about Mahrez is by the time game week 5 comes around, which City is the standout candidate, he's probably not nailed on. I'd say he's nailed on for the first few at least. But by the time the 5th game week comes around, is he going to be nailed on? That's the question.
I remember from last season as well with Mahrez, like it just takes him to do one stupid thing, like not pass to a player when he should and shoot. And then he doesn't play for 3 games. Like Pep sits him on the naughty step. So yeah, I think you've got to be prepared to be able to take him out as soon as he's out of favour with Mahrez, which is something I don't really like, especially when I know with Son that he's just going to play week in week out. He'll have to get injured really for him not to play. I was just thinking then with the questions, shall we maybe do like one in between each segment just to break it up and then people who've asked the question, they don't get bored waiting for it to be answered.
Yeah, we had a point from Pete when we were doing the eye test saying great show was per. Thanks Pete for the feedback. He's watching. He watches the games to help him get ahead of the curve. So he's very much an eye test person, which is interesting because stats is dominating the FPL sphere. So it's interesting to get that kind of thinking on things, that watching the games is his way of doing his FPL team.
So if you watch a game and a player like looks on fire, maybe hits the post or has a goal that's ruled out for VAR or offside, which means that they don't end up looking good in the stats, would you how do you assess that?
In terms, what? So
say for example that game Bamford had last season, where you remember the game where he pointed and his finger ended up meaning he was offside because he pointed where he wanted to. So that doesn't show in the stats, but that was a goal. So say for example a player has a game like that where they're doing all the right things, they look great, but because of certain things like hitting the post or a player doesn't pass when they're through on goal or a goal gets ruled out for offside, I think sometimes that's where the eye test is massive because all that stuff doesn't show. It means that player doesn't show in the stats.
Yeah, no, it's a fair assessment on things. I think there's always going to be anomalies, isn't there? I think stats covers you for probably 80% of football. I think it's that last killer 20% that probably, like you say, the marginal offside calls, people not passing and stuff. Maybe, yeah, like I say, the two that stood out last year probably Son and Lingard in terms of breaking the XG and XGA stats.
Cool. Oh, we're actually on to the issue questions now, aren't we? That's where we're
going. So we've got a couple from Fadsley again. So hi, Fadsley. He's saying Bertrand or Ricardo Pereira. For me, it's Bertrand because I think Castagne's back soon, isn't it? I just think Bertrand's kind of nailed in that left back spot.
I probably just wouldn't go for either of them because I think Castagna can play on both sides, can't he?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
He did last season. So yeah, I'm not that sure. And also with the thing with Pereira is, I know he's played a lot of minutes in pre-season, but it's a long layoff he's coming from. Like, I'd like to see him have a couple of like 90-minute games back to back before going there. A couple of proper like intense real games before going for him. But if I had to pick between the two of them just for the first few, it would be Pereira just because he's more attacking. I think Bertrand will be the one that sits back a bit more, and it'll be the other side. Pereira will bomb on.
Yeah, fair enough. It'd be interesting to see how Leicester kind of do Europa League. Teams that have done it in the past, especially the group stage, they do have like a Europa League team, don't they, in the Premier League, and then they kind of merge towards the knockout stage. So I can see that's where Daka and Kelechi will get most of the minutes in the Europa League, and maybe that's where Amati might shift to now. Vestergaard's playing and stuff. So I think maybe it is a wait and see for Leicester, just to see who them players are. The only one who really excites me is probably Harvey Barnes. He's not in my latest draft, but he's very much on the outskirts with it. For me, it's probably, we'll probably talk about it, but it's probably Barnes and Grealish or Mahrez and Benrahma, which is the same value.
Interesting.
And then the last question from Fadsley is, do you think Vardy is nailed on? For me, I think Premier League, yeah, but his price puts you off a bit. If he was a tad lower, I probably potentially might go there once they have a nice run. But probably
the thing I'd say for Vardy is that if you are of the thinking that you're going to want Lukaku straight away as soon as he's at Chelsea, in terms of team structure and planning, like Vardy's a good placeholder. You'll be able to get to him easily enough within a move or two if you have Vardy there, which is an argument I've heard for having him. I just don't. I think with Iheanacho there and the form he was in last season, I just don't think you can say for sure that he's nailed on. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of 60 minutes subbed off, and or maybe Iheanacho starts, he gets subbed off, Vardy gets the last 30 against tied legs. I think it could. I just don't really like going for either of any of the Leicester strikers for that reason now.
Yeah, it's fair enough. You can see him get subbed off, but I think he will play the majority, and he's got Europa League not in the squad written all over it for the league, so he'll probably get the rest at home and stuff. So I can see him keeping him fresh for the Premier League, but he might come off, like you say, especially when you've got Daka on the bench last 30. So that's the question so far. We'll run through. I'm sure you're all excited to hear our. Well, is it going to be a final team? You'll probably still be tinkering on the trip down to London, won't you?
You're still tinkering in your head. Mahrez, Benrahma, Grealish.
Yeah, I'm all over the place. Like I said, there's the last three spots that are, for me, are just quite tricky. It's the last two midfield and the striker option, which you kind of tinker with all the time. But other than that, my what is that? That's 12 of the 15's nailed for me.
Nice. Are you sharing your screen for this?
Yeah. So this is your team here.
Going to mine first.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Right. So yeah, I've talked a lot about Son during the other segment, so might as well start there. I think in my last draft I had Harvey Barnes, and I think with the doubt around how Leicester are going to play, is it going to be 3-5-2, or are they going to have a one up front and play Barnes, or if they play two up front, does Barnes then drop out? I just don't really know. So I decided that alongside with the fact of what Son offers for captaincy options to go for Son, and having Tsimikas enabled made it possible to afford Son, Salah, and Bruno. The strikers, I just think Antonio and Ings, they're the two proven ones. They're the two most proven ones of the strikers around that bracket, and they've got the best fixtures as well. Tony's close, even Tony. It's just, I think if I start with these more expensive two, I can then move down to Ivan Tony if I want to. If he starts and he looks good and Brentford look good, I can then make that decision. the only thing I don't like most about this team is having the 4.5 forward. Because if you go into a 2 up front system, you have to have a non-playing forward 4.5. Whereas if you go 3-4-3, the 4.5 midfielder you have on your bench is actually a player that plays. So that's the big drawback of this team I've got currently, I think. And also maybe you could argue having to play Veltman a 4.5. Having to play Veltman or White each week is another drawback. But I think come game week 3 or 4, Arsenal's fixtures do look really good, and I'm happy to play Veltman for the first 2 or 3. So that's something I've sort of made my peace with, as it were, to have Son, Salah, and Bruno. And we talked a lot about Sanchez last week. I think that's the keeper most people are going for. So not really much to say there. Any first thoughts from yourself?
Is there a chance that you could maybe downgrade Rafinha to a 4.5 and get Tony? Will that enter your thoughts? Leeds have got a tough start, haven't they?
Yeah, I did start to look at Leeds' fixtures just the other day and think, do I really want Rafinha? But it's what I was saying to you before. I just think Rafinha's more proven than Tony. Which team do you more expect to start well? Even though Leeds have the harder fixtures, I just think I've got more faith that they'll start well and score goals than Brentford. And he's so involved in most attacks. Leeds have Rafinha's there or thereabouts. I
loved watching him last year. I think he probably underscored, didn't he? He's kind of watching him like he was best player on the pitch majority of the games. He kind of, I know he got respectable points total, but yeah, he's probably another one who he starts firing. I've had him in a few drafts, but it's just them first few fixtures, and once you play your wild card, you can have him in anyway. But yeah, it's a question: do you get on early and just ride out them tough fixtures?
Yeah, because I think the other thing I'm maybe unhappy with is we've been joking about your injury. The 2 strikers I've got are the sorts of players who, they could pull a hamstring Tuna Kelly early. So, yeah, that's something that I am concerned about, especially for Antonio. Because with Ings, I'm definitely targeting the first 3. The first 3 fixtures for Ings are just amazing, aren't they? While I'm talking about Ings, actually, what did you make of Dean Smith's comments yesterday about how he still sees Watkins as a striker? Do you think it's going to be 4-4-2? Because we were saying last week that maybe Watkins will go off to the left, but if we take Watkins at his word, which we shouldn't, given what he did last season with Grealish, it does sound like they're planning some other sort of system.
Yeah, and I suppose if you have McGinn and Douglas Luiz in there as a 2, you probably won't get overrun majority of games because they've got so much energy, aren't they, up and down. So maybe if you are playing 4-4-2, you kind of afford, if you've got McGinn and Douglas Luiz holding, then maybe they will start 2 up top. I think it's a tough one, isn't it? I always was of the opinion that Watkins will get shifted out left and Ings up top. I think Ings definitely starts. I'll hang my hat on that. And if when he's benched first game, you can come back to me. But I think the reason he's gone there, what makes Aston Villa appealing to him is he must have been told that he's going to be the number 1 striker. Otherwise, he could have gone to Spurs or someone like that, where he's kind of second fiddle and to things like that. I don't think he would have moved that to Aston Villa at that stage of his career, where he's probably got one last run, hasn't he, at a club where he's the main man in the Premier League 3 or 4 years. So I wouldn't worry about him getting rotated. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how Watkins kind of and him intertwine with each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's just I'm thinking is with him that he'll be he'll be the one that they look to with the crosses and the getting the balls through to. And once Villa have their new sidings in play, Buendia and Bailey, El Ghazi won't be on the pitch, and Ings should have the pens as well, which we know how much of a factor pens can be when you're picking your players. So yeah. Any other?
We've got a comment from Rohan Sharma here. He's saying Buendia for the first 3 game weeks, and he was very much an option for me. But it's like you say, with Aston Villa's fixtures after three games, they kind of fall off a cliff, and you don't want to be transferring 2 out. And I just love Ings from years gone by. He's so clinical in the box, and I just prefer him over Buendia. He's kind of tried and tested, isn't he? I know he's at a different club, but in terms of FPL, he's tried and tested over many years.
Yeah, I'm not sure Bundy's going to play game week 1, is he? I think
He's got a doubt flag over him.
Well, it's just he's not played that much in pre-season yet, so I don't know if he'll be thrown in. Which is the other thing. So yeah, maybe that's one to look out for in the press conference news. If you do want Buendia, and Dean Smith said he's happy with him, it's just that's the other thing with picking players from teams where managers aren't that forthcoming with like their availability. Dean Smith's up there with the worst of them now, given the way he just kept telling us Grealish was going to be back next week for about 2 months last season. So how much you can take from the quotes from Dean Smith is debatable.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll run through my team. There's been a couple of changes since we shared with you on Monday evening. Majority is quite similar, but there's been a few key changes. Like yourself, I've got Sanchez in net. That's not changed once since my first draft, I don't think. Trent's not changed once. Shaw's not changed once. So there's a few who've kind of stayed in there. Zimikas is someone I've gone for since the Robbo news and the assist. I think he's probably nailed as that third Liverpool spot because they have a great run first 5. And then Fernandes and Salah have been mainstays in my drafts just because of United's first few fixtures, really, and Liverpool. I think Salah might have been in my team every game week last season. I just think he can score out of anywhere. So I don't think he'll probably leave my team again this year. And then, well, that might change with Lukaku and Kane. We'll see, actually. And then Antonio and Ings as well. They've been other mainstays in my drafts. Ings, since he joined Villa, has probably been in there since he joined, really. And then Antonio, Aston Villa, West Ham having a lovely start to the season, and he's another one who last year he was really good, wasn't he, when he was fit? So I kind of want to give him the opportunity first game week. And then the last 3 I've talked about, the Holy Trinity, as I like to call it. It's just 3 players who have kind of changed all day today, really. I've had Rafinha in at one point for Tony in a 3-5-2. I've had Grealish and Barnes, and then I tried getting Son in at one point as well, see what effect that could have on my team. But I just think Mahrez has had a great preseason, and City's second fixture against Norwich is a strong captaincy candidate, and I do think he's going to get the first couple at least. I'll be very surprised if he doesn't play the first couple. And the City team against Norwich at home, first time in fans. Well, everyone's first time in fans for a couple of years now, so I just think that fixture's got a drubbing written all over it. I know Norwich would like to think otherwise, but I kind of want to tap into that City attack, and he probably seems the most nailed in terms of pre-season.
Are you thinking, just quickly while we're on that, are you thinking in game week 2, if Mahrez plays game week 1 and looks good, would you captain Mahrez over Salah game week 2?
It gives me the option, doesn't it? Whether I do or not will probably depend on the first game and how both players look. At least it gives me the option of tapping into that City attack. If City turn over Spurs 4-0 and look like they carried on where they left off first game of the season, and Liverpool are struggling against Norwich, you kind of got a decision to make there, haven't you? So I just think a lot of players are going to be trying to get that City attack second game week, aren't they? So you can kind of jump ahead of the curve there, really, and just hope that he has a good game against Tottenham, which he could well do. We know no Harry Kane factor. Nuno's first game at home with fans that maybe not necessarily wanted him there. If City get an early goal, what effect's that going to have in the stadium and stuff like that? So there's a lot of factors at play in that first game as well. And then Ben Rama's just he's kind of become a Twitter favourite, hasn't he, in the past few days? I know he scored a worldie the other day, and at 6 million, Moyes is probably wanting him to fill that Jesse Lingard position for West Ham, and that team's kind of set up for that position, really. I know Antonio gets a lot of goals and assists up front, but we saw Lingard, how much freedom he had in that role last year, just because got such a strong defence, West Ham. And then you got Rice and Souček holding. It's kind of just a basis there for whoever is in the 10 or that kind of attacking position to kind of do what they want. So that's probably the reason that Ben Rama is in my team. It might change, but I just think that's 6 million before that first wild card. Newcastle, then Leicester, potentially tough one, but no Fofana and Evans, and then Crystal Palace, Southampton, and then 5 and 6 is where you're going to be making your wild card, really, when you look at past seasons, and then you look at Lukaku coming in and Chelsea's fixture turn. So that's the reason he's in my team at the moment. And then Tony, we talked about earlier, a question from Chris. He's another one with, after Arsenal, they got Palace, Villa, Brighton, Wolves, and then their fixtures drop off a cliff at 6 as well. So you kind of, this team's kind of earmarked wild card in 6, but we'll see how that goes. Might play it earlier. And then the bench, talk to Foster. If you've got Foster in your team, my advice would be to take him out because I don't think he's going to play now. And he's very much nailed on for that 0.1 price decrease as soon as everyone starts playing the wild card. And then Amarty's, like say with Vestergaard, he's probably another one who might change to 3.9. So might potentially tinker with that. And then Ben White, Brownhill. I do like Arsenal's fixtures from 4 onwards. They've got a lovely run, haven't they? Might even play the first game against Brentford. But yeah, that's my thinking at the moment. Like I say, those last 3 positions are probably up for grabs.
Yeah, so with Benrahma, like he's someone I've looked at. It's just if he'd played a bit more last season, I'd be more confident. It's just I know he's had a lot of minutes and he's looked like one of the best players in pre-season. I just wonder whether, with how Moyes is he just gonna, as soon as the proper games start, is he just gonna go back to the players who he knows track back like Bowen and Fornells? Like there's just that seed of doubt of like, is he nailed? Is the thing that's stopping me from going for Benrahma. Otherwise, I'd have him over Rafinha.
Yeah, well, the thing is, when Leeds fixtures turn, Benrahma's an easy switch to Rafinha, isn't it? Because a similar price point over Rafinha's probably 0.5 more. So that probably makes the decision easier to start with Benrahma and then switch to Rafinha potentially. I just think a player always comes from nowhere, don't they, the first couple of games, and hopefully he's going to be the one. There's a lot of knowledgeable people about FPL and stuff who've got him in their teams, their current draft. So that's the reason that I'm kind of erring on side. Maybe 2 West Ham attackers is probably a bit too much, but I just think that 6 million is a nice value if he is starting for West Ham.
Yeah, fair play. Where would you say if he doesn't start the first 2, or if he gets subbed off like 50-60, what would you do with him? Would you just ride it out until the Leeds fixture turn, or would you address it?
Yeah, potentially depends on who kind of emerges, whether Barnes or if Rafinha's smashing it, regardless of who he's playing. Then that would probably be the switch. There's not too many at 6 million, is there? You probably have to kind of take money out of the squad elsewhere. So it will be a decision I have to make. And the problem is, if Amarty's not playing, then I've probably only got one. I know Brownhill's played well in pre-season and he's got a couple of goals, but I don't really want to be starting with Brownhill. So I've effectively got a one route out of a player being benched, and that's Ben White, who does have, 2 and 3 aren't the best, but then from there. So I've got one route out of the player being benched, but any more than that, if Mahrez and Benrahma get benched, for example, and kind of sucking myself, so that's probably a decision I have to make.
Yeah. I think, that's the only thing I'd say, isn't it? You've got, like, it's a very well-rounded team, apart from the fact that those 2 midfielders, like, they're just they're both in that sort of category of they could get rotated.
Yeah.
Have we had any comments on the teams?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. One from Rohan. What do you think of Aubameyang and Arsenal for the season? For me, go on. You've got a big.
Just not going there. Not going there at all.
Pepe 7.5, and he ended the season on fire quietly. Not many teams had him, but I saw his goals and assists for like the last 10 games or something. He was top 5.
Yeah, it was like, was it in the last 10? Was it like him and who was the other one who was really surprising? Pereira and Pepe were just kept on like ticking over and nobody went for them. Arsenal, I just don't know. And Aubameyang's just so hot and cold. I started with him last season and put a lot of faith in him, and over Salah, which did not work. And now that he's back to being a striker again, like the appeal of him being a midfielder has gone. I'm just not really interested. And there's also the thing with Laka, like which one's going to be the main striker? I don't know. So
I think for me, the intriguing options at Arsenal, the cheaper ones aren't the Ben Whites, your Smith Rowes, and without European football, they might get on a bit of a run in the Premier League. But I think it's probably the cheaper players, and then potentially Pepe might be another one, 7.5 that might interest.
Smith Rowe's definitely a standout for me, I think, because he's been given the number 10. He's got the new contract. If he does play number 10 the first few and he looks to have that position on lock at 5.5, he's a great option for the number 10 of Arsenal at 5.5 in your midfield.
Yeah, he's potentially someone I could switch to from Ben Rama if he's not playing well. That's a suggestion. And another question from Chris Bell, which is an interesting one. With Lukaku arriving at Chelsea, does he edge Kane out if you're going to hit that top dollar striker position, if you're going to get one of them?
Is that if Kane's at City or at Spurs?
Well, it doesn't mention that, but
right. Well, if Kane's at Spurs, I'd definitely go for Lukaku over him. If Kane's at City, I'd probably go Kane over Lukaku. I don't know. It's just really hard. I think I was thinking about this the other day, like which one of those two is going to score the most goals if Kane's at City and Lukaku's at Chelsea. It's a tough one because I think for the second half of the season, the top two for XG were City and Chelsea. So it's a really close call. And they're both like really goal hungry players. Like they'll both be shooting on sight. Like they're both the kind of players who jump around and scream if someone doesn't pass the ball when they're open. Lukaku a bit more so for that. You'd probably expect Kane to score more at City, but then when you think that some of the players that Chelsea have for whipping balls in, like Ziyech has been on fire in pre-season. His delivery is amazing. Chilwell and James on the wings, they both, if they keep playing wing backs, they'll both be whipping the balls into the box at any opportunity, which is meat and drink for Lukaku. I think Lukaku could score. I think it'll be very close. So I don't know. Just if I'm wildcarding game week 6 or 7 and they're both at those clubs, I'd probably just completely change the structure of my team and have both of them.
Yeah, I'm probably with you on that. I'll probably wait and see. But if Kane's at City, it probably will be Kane, Lukaku, and Salah. And then if Bruno's still smashing it, then you've got a decision to make. But
I'd lose Bruno at that point, I think.
Yeah, and then there's probably get Sancho or someone who's a bit cheaper at 9.5 if you can go there. I think for me, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Lukaku the past year, how much his games come on at Inter, and then the Euros are kind of. I really saw that, and I think he's a different animal to the one that left United. He's really took on his game. I think Conte probably deserves a lot of credit for like transforming his game. I think he was 9 assists as well in Serie A, so let's not forget that it's not all about goals for him. Like Kane, he's gonna get a few assists too, and if he racks up a few assists alongside them goals, him and Kane are going to be on for frightening totals with their respective teams for sure.
Yeah, it'll depend a little bit on what price he comes in at as well, won't it? So Kane's 12.5, I think, isn't he? Whereas if Lukaku comes in a mil cheaper, that might just help make that decision.
Yeah, 12.5. Yeah, I think 11 or 11.5 is what Lukaku will come in at. I'll be surprised if it's 12 first season. 11.5 is probably fair, isn't it? When you look at Sterling at 11, Vardy at 10.5, he probably deserves $1 million more than them two. But I think 12 would be a bit unfair.
The other thing that would maybe go in Lukaku's favour would be the fact that he becomes immediately head and shoulders the best pick from Chelsea when he's there. Whereas at City, if Grealish or Gundogan or Mahrez are nailed on, you can go to someone in the midfield instead from City and still have a decent option from the City attack. Whereas with the rotation that Chelsea will have in the midfielders, which we saw last season, it'd be harder to go for another Chelsea option apart from Lukaku, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. We've got one last question from Rohan. With Lukaku signing, what will happen with Timo Werner?
Yeah, I think it's going to be either Havertz or Werner, isn't it? Playing off him. I'd probably lean to. Well, I don't know. Maybe the teams where there's space to run in behind, you might play Werner, and then the teams where it's a deep block, where Havertz is a bit more suited to receiving the ball back to goal and linking up and breaking the team down. I think it might just be. I think those two might just play depending on the team they're coming up against. Like Werner against, like say a team like City, where there's going to be space to run to behind, he comes into his own in those kind of games, doesn't he? Whereas teams where you can't just sort of use your speed and knock the ball in front of you and run as fast as you can, he kind of struggles.
Yeah, it goes back to the point that you said, though, doesn't it? If Lukaku signs at Chelsea, he's head and shoulders above anyone. So in terms of FPL, like Lukaku is probably the guy you go to anyway. So it probably doesn't matter what happens to Werner and Havertz in that sense.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, Havertz 8.5 in midfield. Like, if he does end up like you were talking about Lukaku's assists, I mean, if Havertz starts picking up some of the, if Lukaku just starts getting up there and knocking a few down straight to Havertz, maybe he'll come into our thinking a bit. But yeah, look, I can't see going for more than Lukaku.
Yeah, no, interesting questions there. Thanks all for asking the questions, and yeah, keep them coming for future streams. I think that's it for us, isn't it? There's one last thing. Fantasy Football Fest. Do you want to make a comment on that before our trip down tomorrow?
Yeah, so if you've not seen, I think it's at FF_fest or something like that. If you've not seen, you look it up on Twitter. There's a fantasy football event near Waterloo in London tomorrow. Starts at 4:00. Tickets are still available, I think. So if you want to come and chat your team, talk fantasy, generally be a gimp, come and speak to us there. I think we'll be there from about maybe 4:00 or 5:00, something like that, depending on traffic and dentist related issues. So there's a bar. So if you're not interested if you're not really that interested in fantasy, just come and have a couple of drinks. I think there's going to be there's some fun stuff going on, isn't there? There are Kelly Summers and Jimbo who's from the Totally Football Show, does a lot of Premier League presenting. They're hosting, so it's got a decent sort of lineup to it. I'm not really sure exactly how good it's going to be, but I think it looks like it's going to be decent. So we're going to go fly the flag. Speaking of flying the flag, we're fully repping now as well. Can kiss the badge.
I didn't even notice it. You get that quite.
So yeah, we'll be there. Just look for the two guys full kit wankers without a full set of teeth. You'll find us. We should probably say before we end, if you've liked the stream, even if you've not liked it, please like it. Helps us get up in the algorithm. I don't even know if that's true, but everybody says it, so I'm just going to say it. It helps us stand out on YouTube if you press like and subscribe, etc. So
yeah,
please do that.
I was browsing YouTube on an unsigned account before, and we popped up when I typed in fantasy football, so that was exciting. So yeah, more of the same, please.
Right, we've just hit an hour, so feels like a good time to wrap up.
Yeah, good luck for the teams on Friday. There's nothing like the first game week, and then it all goes downhill. Well, it does for Mindy, but there's nothing like the first deadline, is there? It's exciting.
I just realised for people listening on the podcast, they won't have seen what I did there. But basically, I've got a T-shirt that has our logo on it now, and we've got one for Callum. So when we're at the fantasy football event tomorrow, we're going to be repping the podcast hard. That's for anyone who's listening tomorrow or later this evening. I was wondering what was just going on. That was that. We'll have to remember that. The way we're doing these podcasts this season, whenever we go into stuff that's visual, we'll have to remember that people listening on the podcast what we see and what we're on about.
Yeah. All right. On that note.
Teething problems, literally.